Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And the comic today is Fantastic Four, issue number 262, dated January 1984. And this is the conclusion of the previous issue that I had reviewed, recapped, and that was issue number 261. I had done that just as the Fantastic Four film was released. I had spoken about the film. It's a good film. And unfortunately, in my private life, I had a few issues to deal with, so I couldn't revisit this until now. And this is the trial of Reed Richards, and this is the issue where Reed finds himself on trial for saving the life of Galactus. He is being judged by the surviving victims of Galactus, and the judge is a friend of those people. So it's not looking good for Reed here. But nevertheless, as we know, he gets out of it. And this is a really good issue. This is, I would say, the most Star Trek Next Generation type comic I've ever read. Obviously, this came out 3 years before the premiere of the show. So obviously, John Byrne, who has a history of kind of borrowing ideas from other creators, he did not steal from Star Trek Next Generation. If anything, it was clear that at least some of the writers in that writers' room for Star Trek Next Generation, they definitely read this issue, because this is you could see a prototype of Jean-Luc Picard in this issue. The cover is a good one. It's a very Neil Adams type cover. There's a lot of faces here. And here, and that there in the background, in the foreground is Reed Richards chained. And I'm just going to go into it. But before I do, going to take a look at this one ad. And it's for Atari, which were the big game developers at that time, the same way like Xbox and PlayStation were. Atari was to my generation, and this is for Battlezone. This is one of the last arcade games I was playing before I aged out of them. As much as I enjoyed playing Battlezone, it was never as exciting as this. Although I will say I never wore one of these dumb-looking headbands. Kind of looking like, what's his name from Cobra Kai? Johnny, the gummies. We'll get to it later. Johnny Lawrence. Johnny Lawrence is who I was thinking of. Page. So there's no traditional splash page here, and it's sort of a prologue as what's being set up here. And one of the things they're doing is they're really leaning on this, it's Assistant Editors Month time. And I think what was happening is that the main editors were taking a elongated vacation. I know that they were spending time at Comic-Con in San Diego. San Diego, beautiful city, been there multiple times. And so they're sort of leaning really heavily on this kind of like assistant editors month thing. So I think it's kind of an excuse to be a little more experimental. So because some comic book readers, sometimes they don't like too much change. They like the illusion of change, but sometimes they don't really like actual change. So it's kind of a way of saying, hey, if some of these changes are upsetting you, they're not going to last. So we see imagery. We see a split panel here. We see John Byrne to the right, and we see he's talking to Mike Higgins. And Mike Higgins is concerned that John Byrne won't be able to get the next issue of Fantastic Four out. Because apparently in the MCU, comic books do exist. But the thing is that the creators are fed the stories from the actual characters. So there's very little creativity in this particular universe. You just took the the real life adventures, and you just waited, to hear that call from the team that this has happened, or this adventure had just concluded. So John Byrne here is kind of talking to Mike Higgins, saying, "Listen, I need to be spoon-fed some stuff. I'm not that creative. I look creative. My work looks really creative, but really intellectually, I need to be spoon-fed." So that's what John is saying here. So we see John. John lives in Illinois at this time, and Mike Higgins was calling from New York. And comic book artists and writers, they did have a nice little thing before COVID that they could work from home. And obviously, and particularly someone like John Byrne is going to do that. I know that Jack Kirby, in the later years of him being at Marvel and at being DC, he largely worked from California. It seems like John is telling us that he's living in Illinois at the time, and we see him here at home. He's really stuck here. He's calling someone. They actually printed out this number. That can be a little dangerous because people love to call. They would call these numbers and prank call. There was a really popular song called Jenny, do you have my number? And it has a phone number in it. And every person who had that phone number had to discontinue it, because when the song became a huge hit, they would just be called nonstop and harassed. So anyway, the number that he's calling is for the Fantastic Four Incorporated, and apparently they know John, and they're telling him no, the Fantastic Four has not reported their whereabouts at this moment. So apparently the FF have a 1-800 number that you can actually call and find out about their whereabouts, which is quite convenient for their villains, their nemesis. But I guess if for some reason if you need to get in contact with them, they do provide that service. I guess they were bothering the doorman at the Baxter Building too much. So anyway, John's really concerned here. He doesn't have a story. He'll have to make up something. John is terrified about that idea that he'll have to use original material, because he's like, oh my God, I'll be exposed. But then the voice calls out, John Byrne. And we see that the Watcher is here. And it turns out the Watcher has come for John Byrne specifically. And John is kind of taken aback by this. Turn the page. Next panel, we see John Byrne's wife. She is drawn quite lovely. I'm sure she loved this. And John gave her 2 panels too. You better believe that this piece of original art, that stayed in the John Byrne home. So anyway, his wife is concerned that John isn't home. She's probably worried that John is yelling at the neighborhood kids or something. And it turns out, no, John is being teleported by the Watcher to where Reed Richards currently is. So John is kind of taking this wild trip here. It's very similar to the trip that Tim Allen took in Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest, great movie, where they said, okay, we're going to return you back to Earth. And it's very similar to that. Going to turn the page. But before I do that, I'm going to say the Watcher is kind of letting John know what's going on. So there's a lot of expository dialogue to kind of keep John up to date. We see an ad. It's for a video game. There seems to be fewer ads in these comics, but most of them, there's not a whole lot of diversity in them. It's mostly like video games and stuff like that. This is War Room. Not familiar with that one. ColecoVision. I had one of those early ColecoVisions. Gonna see now there's an ad for the subscription service. So basically, you would get your comic books at 41 cents an issue if you mail ordered them. Save about 19 cents. It wouldn't be worth the trouble for me. I'd be worried that the mailman would steal them. And here's another ad. It's for a television show. 321 Contact. I may have some episodes of this on beta tape. It's kind of like a kid's discovery show. I would kind of watch some of these shows as a kid. I didn't watch enough of them. I wish I did. But yeah, it's telling you that this ad was made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Okay, now we're going to get to the letters page. It's quite a while since we got to the story. We see a little note here saying that that it is Assistant Editors Month at Marvel, and that kind of the big wigs are currently in San Diego at this point. So no big deal. Take a look at some of the letters. First one is "Don't Kill Terrox." That was a great storyline with Terrox and Galactus. That was the storyline that kicked off this storyline. When Terrax was making the big power move of getting rid of Galactus. Terrific story. Oh, I noticed there's something interesting here. They're not giving out the addresses anymore. Someone might have told them, hey, that might have been kind of a bad idea whenever we printed a letter from our fans to give the addresses. Kind of don't know if any kids got any unwanted visits or not. Although I did hear that Dave Cockrum had, as a teen, he had written to the Fantastic Four, and there was a girl who liked his response, and she actually wrote him back, and the two of them ended up getting married, years later. See, the next letter is from Charles from Cheyenne, Wyoming. He loved the way that Dr. Doom was characterized. He really enjoyed it, and he says that the characterization of Doom was so good that it didn't bother him that the Fantastic Four weren't really involved in the issue that much. So he feels that John Byrne did a good job, fleshing out that villain. Let's see, another issue talking about 258. Again, it was mostly a Dr. Doom's issue. He's asking why Wolverine was fooled by the Doom bot. And the answer is basically that since Wolverine never encountered Dr. Doom before, he didn't really know what scent to look for. A somewhat kind of okay explanation. Although, Wolverine would have noticed the absence of a human smell. You figure Dr. Doom kind of smells more like metal or actually oil than anything else. But yeah, they kind of dropped the ball here because Wolverine would have noticed no human smell. Okay, another letter. But yeah, this is another letter praising the characterization of Doom. And another letter that was from Jay. And another letter from Paul. Again, he's happy that Dr. Doom is this megalomaniac. So yeah, there's lots of praise here for John Byrne's storytelling. John Byrne tells a pretty good story, I have to say. Okay, talking about Christoph and one letter is speculating what Doom would have said if Magneto was there. And they're basically saying that Doom wouldn't care. He has very little respect for anyone other than himself, no matter how powerful they are. Magneto's quite powerful. Okay, so we're getting to the story, and this is kind of the splash page. It's a 2-page splash page. The trial of Reed Richards. We see this very alien setup here, where Reed is on one podium, and Leandra who is the judge. She's on another one, and we see that the Watcher and John Byrne are center stage here, which is true. Hey, think this is a John Byrne comic. Number one, John Byrne's going to be on the center stage. Number two, he's going to be on the stage with a powerful godlike deity, which, of course, according to John, they would have a personal, direct, first name basis relationship here. So this is for John Byrne's ego here, and we see the other members of the Fantastic Four. They're basically like friends of the defendant. I don't know what you would call them. They're right next to the podium where Reed is standing. So they're sort of making it clear that these three individuals are kind of peripheral characters in this crime. So while Reed is the one being charged formally, and he's the one who did what they said was a crime, which is saving Galactus' life, nevertheless, they're kind of treating the other members of the Fantastic Four as unindicted co-conspirators here. And again, this is a good artistic decision by John Byrne. So anyway, John Byrne, he walks toward the Fantastic Four. He knows these guys. He has to figure out what's going on. The Fantastic Four, they know Byrne. They know him on, again, first name basis. And apparently, at least some of them aren't happy with John Byrne's depiction of them in comic books. So we know that comic book characters actually will read their own adventures. We see Johnny Storm, he kind of recognizes Byrne, wondering what he's doing here. The Thing is a bit grumpy here, saying that, well, maybe he'll get the story right this time. And I'm sorry, I just went the wrong direction. And Sue is the one taking kind of the leadership position here. And that was one of the good things about John Byrne's run, is that he really kind of, he built up the Invisible Woman. I don't know whether they stopped calling her the Invisible Girl during his run. I kind of got the feeling he did. Mind you, Sue Storm, Sue Richards, she was a mom and she was raising a kid, but she was still called the Invisible Girl. And I'm not sure whether John changed that, but he did embrace that, in that he made her a much more formidable power, and he kind of got Sue out of her shell, so to speak, where she really started taking command. And because even in the early 60s, like the first couple years, I think in Fantastic Four 11, there were fans complaining about Sue, that she was sort of like, playing the role that Robin would play as, the boy hostage. And they would say Sue's an impediment, Sue gets in the way, she's totally useless. And Stan Lee had a strange defense of that. And basically it was to point to Abe Lincoln's mom and say, listen, Abe Lincoln was a great man and he needed a mom. And you have to remember that women are important because they give birth to great men. And they wipe their asses when they need their asses wiped. And they'll clean the sheets whenever they take a piss on them. And, this is how women are just as important as men, because they take care of men. It was a really odd little story. But the thing is, John Byrne, to his credit, he actually empowered Sue Richards in ways other writers didn't. So anyway, Sue's the one who's kind of explaining to John what's going on, and that the issue here is that Reed had saved Galactus' life, and he is being put on trial for doing that by the surviving victims of Galactus. So then we turn the page and we see Leandra. Leandra has a very, shall we say, stern look on her face. And we see her bodyguard, Gladiator, right beside her. And Sue is explaining that this is something that they kind of knew might have been coming up in their futures, because apparently a hologram of Leandra appeared in their bedroom. It looks like Sue and Reed, they sleep in the nude, and the hologram. I don't know if she's judging the goods or not there, but the hologram is just informing them that, listen, Galactus is our sworn enemy. This entity is a fucking menace. We don't like what he's doing, and you elongating his existence is a crime in our eyes, and I don't blame them for feeling that way. And she's letting Reed Richards and Sue Richards know that this is against Shi'ar law, and we plan on prosecuting to the fullest. Now we don't know when this hologram. We do. On the night before we entered the negative zone. I don't know when that was. So they did get warning. Apparently, the Shi'ar were taking their time in terms of setting up the proceedings. They wanted to make sure they were going to get the verdict they wanted. John Byrne, he lets his opinion about Leandra known here. Why, that arrogant witch. I always had the impression she was too full of her own importance, but to actually threaten the Fantastic Four. I think this is John maybe sending a subtle little message to Chris Claremont that Leandra was a character created by Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum. John Byrne, he might not have liked that. He might be using the Fantastic Four to let his feelings be known that you guys created a sucky character here. He might have been taking a shot at Chris Claremont, I should say, because John Byrne is now the sole creative force of the Fantastic Four, and he can kind of like even out these little scores. I think John Byrne in this issue does do that. There was also a court case that he was involved with that I don't think he liked the way the proceedings went. And I can talk about that a little later, but I want to go on to the story. Leandra is pressing the case, that, Reed Richards must pay a penalty. And she's saying that the party that has standing here is the Skrulls, because the last planet that Galactus had consumed was the Skrull homeworld. And Leandra had to deal with the Skrulls. She clearly did not like them, based on issue X-Men number 137. She also doesn't like the Creeds either. But the thing is that their presence is enough of a force where she has to acknowledge them. She can't be like the Dominion in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where they're so powerful they don't really have to kind of like treat others as equals. Leandra has a powerful empire for sure, but she realizes that there are other bullies in the room. And the thing here, he's very upset about this, saying that he feels that Leandra has already judged Reed guilty before the proceedings had started. It appears that their lawyer is a dickhead. Literally. He is drawn like a dickhead. And again, this probably goes to John Byrne not really liking the legal system. And so this could be a little bit of a subversive kick at that. Turn the page. This is an ad for models. I was never really into that. Okay, so basically the dickhead here is explaining how the Shi'ar legal system works. And it works on feelings. And basically what happens, everyone presents the facts, and there are certain globes that can feel the vibe that is going on with the jury. And the various colors represent the various feelings of the jury, and it does it in proportion. So if you see more lighter colors, that means the jury is still is feeling sympathetic toward the defendant. If you see more darker colors, then the jury is very much against the defendant. So it's kind of based on vibe. And this is what's explained. And then the scroll, they open up the trial by presenting their case as to why Reed Richards is guilty of this crime. And we go through a kind of a retelling of what happened in the last issue. Or no, what happened in an issue that happened about a year and a half earlier. And this involves his new herald. I forgot what her name is, but Frankie Ray. She was a member of the Fantastic Four, and the scroll here is describing how Galactus had found the scroll world, how he just basically consumed it, and all the inhabitants were killed, the ones who couldn't escape. And the crux of it is that I'm going to turn the page. We see an ad for Star Frontiers. Again, there are fewer ads in this comic, but the ones there are big ones. TSR Hobbies. I remember those were kind of big in the late 80s, early 90s. So the story goes on. Basically, Galactus is consuming the scroll world, taking its energies, and the only scrolls that really survived were the ones who were off planet, and this is one of them. And the thing is that the Throne World had set up a system, an elaborate system that was working, that would shield their presence from Galactus's sensors. So Galactus and his various heralds were not able to find this world because the Skrulls, who are very scientifically advanced, they were able to create this type of shielding. But the thing is that this herald had information that the other heralds didn't, and because she was a member of the Fantastic Four, she retained that knowledge. And she knew where the Skrull homeworld was because obviously Reed Richards had this information, and she remembered the information. So that's how Frankie Ray was able to destroy that planet, able to track down and find that planet. As to why she did it, I don't really know. It could have been a situation where it was simply the easiest planet to go to because Galactus. At that point, his powers were they were waning. He was basically on a, what's that device? There's a medical device that kind of cleans your blood. I totally forgot, gummies. But anyway, he's sort of on that. So he was living on recycled energies. So he did need a proper world to consume because he doesn't think of it as destroying. Thinks that as consuming. He kind of feels bad about what happens to the inhabitants of the worlds that he consumes, but then again, he's looking at it from the hunter's point of view. And or it could have been just a situation where maybe Frankie wanted to even up some scores. The Skrulls were definitely an enemy of Earth. She might have thought, hey, I'm doing Earth a favor, along with the rest of the universe, because these guys are menaces. I don't think they would have gone for the Creed world, because the Creed world is apparently it's covered with metal. I don't think that world would be as tasty to Galactus, at least at this time. I don't know what they were doing with comic books really after the 90s. So anyway, the Skrull, he's making a very passionate plea that, hey, we might have been evil colonizers to the rest of the world, but hey, we were married and we had kids, and those people, they have value too. And Reed is listening to this. He realizes that the scroll is correct. That whatever you think about them, they are sentient beings, and that had he not interfered with saving Galactus's life, they would still be around. Reed is accepting his guilt in this, although he's prefacing it with, evil as the scrolls may be, it still seems a crime. He's kind of like, he's not very sympathetic to the scrolls. He doesn't want to come out and outright say, listen, these guys were menaces. They're up to no good. We need to get rid of them. And yet Reed is saying what I did was right. There was a life to save. Meanwhile, Leandra, who is the judge, has said, the scroll has spoken, and his voice is but one small voice, crying out in its torment in a vast, agonizing sympathy of anguish. The prosecution will now show that Reed Richards knew what he did, knew the inevitable consequences of his action. Yeah, so again, the judge, this is a hanging judge here. I'm going to turn the page. John Byrne, he's kind of summarizing what's going on. So we see the faces that we saw on the cover, each of them giving their testimony, their voice, their anguish to what happened to their plans. Now, obviously, everyone knows exactly how Galactus, operates. He has an established MO. But nevertheless, these are, I guess Leandra feels, these are voices that need to be heard. And Reed is feeling the guilt of this. This is, again, very well-drawn panel. This is a very well-drawn issue. Now, the other members of the Fantastic Four are kind of weighing in on this. Johnny Storm is saying out loud to the Watcher, can't say I care for much how this is going. That's not what he said, but gummies. I said this at the time. It would have been easier to let Galactus die. Watcher is explaining to Johnny that you can't say stuff like this out loud because those words could be used against Reed here. But the Watcher says he has a task for Johnny to do. And Johnny's he loves the action. He loves, he's going to want to help Reed here. By the way, talking about the movie did I think a really good job of characterizing Johnny Storm. Johnny Storm is kind of a hard character to like at times. Even though Marvel clearly thought that he could be like the next Spider-Man Peter Parker. It didn't work out that way. They gave the Human Torch character its chances. They couldn't find a way of making that character connect with audiences enough for them to buy issues of just him. So it seems like maybe a lot of Fantastic Four fans were kind of just tolerant of Johnny. And but I thought the movie did a really good job of characterizing him. So anyway, the Watcher sends Johnny off to this mission. And then we see John Byrne, because John Byrne realized, holy crap, I haven't been in these last few pages. I got to make my presence known. He's very excited, very concerned about what's going on. The Watcher says, calm yourself, young man.
Calm yourself, boy. You are acting hysterical.
He's saying that don't worry, the Fantastic Four will get their chance to present their defense. John Byrne seems very concerned. Again, it's Sue. Sue's taking the leadership role here. She's calming everyone down, saying, we have to let the process go about what it's doing because we can't do anything about it. So we might as well just accept it work within the process and see how that goes. And Sue's saying, listen, we need to focus on the trial and not our personal feelings. We may think this is BS, but obviously these guys, they don't feel that way. And these guys can kind of kick our asses. So we need to follow through. Now, we see the Watcher here. He's making his appeal to the jury. I don't think it was very helpful. He's saying that he's a race that just simply watches people. And we're kind of weird, we're kind of creepy, but we watch people. And when people die, we make sure they're watched as they're doing it, as this is being done to them. And he's explained that we've been doing this for a long time. We're the omnipotent viewer, and we know about Galactus. And Galactus is actually older than our current universe, because when this universe was created, he was the one entity that survived the destruction of the previous universe. And in John Byrne will get into that a little later. And he's basically saying that Reed Richards was kind of being nice when he saved Galactus's life. And yeah, that's pretty much what he's saying here. He's using a lot of words to basically say that. He said, yeah, Reed was being nice here. And, and now we're going to present some of our witnesses. Going back to John Byrne and court case, there was one court case where John Byrne was involved. He was a friend of the defendant. What had happened was Marv Wolfman, who was a legendary comic creator, writer, he was suing Marvel over creators' rights. And John Byrne hated the idea of creators' rights. He was a guy, he was very much a company man, and he was like, listen, the company hires you to draw and to be creative and to make them money. And if you make them money, you'll get money, and all is right in the world. And some of the creators did not feel this way, because they felt the difference between, okay, we can do hack work and sell comics, but if we really put our heart and souls and imagination in creating these characters that you can then monetize beyond just selling the comic, then hey, we deserve a bit of that, because part of us was in that. And the trial went on. Jim Shooter was there. He was not obviously the lawyer for Marvel, but he was there. He was the defendant, because he was the guy basically running Marvel at the time. And John Byrne was there as a friend to the defendants. Jim Shooter was miserable. He didn't want to be there. He felt bad that Marv Wolfman, was going through this. John Byrne was like, fuck this guy. He doesn't understand anything. And he should be grateful for the hand that whips him. And what had happened, sorry for going on so long, is that John Byrne, whenever Marv Wolfman was on the stand, John Byrne would make faces. And he would make faces reacting to anything that Marv Wolfman said. And it got to the point where the judge had to stop the proceedings and tell John Byrne to stop doing that, or he was going to be held in contempt of court, or at the very least kicked out of the courtroom. So John Byrne, I think he had some issues with the legal system. So anyway, going back to the story, we see Reed here. He's asked, how does he plead to the crime of saving Galactus' life? He pleads guilty. Dun, dun, dun. And we turn the page. Everyone's surprised, because he's admitting that he did this. But the thing is that Reed... Okay, so I won't go ahead of myself. We see Sue's very upset at this guilty verdict. Ben is trying to console Sue here, because this is basically a death sentence because they know the penalty. But Ben is saying, listen, Reed's the smartest guy around. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan, so we got to trust him here. The judge, Leandra, is like surprised too, but she's surprised in a very positive way, saying, oh, you plead guilty to this. You admit that you did this. Thank you for making life so much easier for us. And our, court recorder doesn't have to type as much because his, fingers are getting hurt. But this is the defense that Reed is going to forward, is that, yes, I'm guilty of this crime. But the question is it a crime? And he's going to defend himself that no, saving the life of Galactus was not a crime in and of itself. So this is where I think the story becomes very Star Trek-ish. And Reed Richards comes a little bit of like Jean-Luc Picard. So anyway, he's making the case that basically saving the life of Galactus was not a crime. And what he's saying here, it's one panel, but there's a lot of dialogue, is that when Galactus first came to Earth, the Watcher says that the Watcher told us that this entity is not evil. He's not here because he enjoys doing this, destroying worlds, and he doesn't have any personal grudges against Earth. He's simply doing this because this is how he survives. The same way that, when a tiger or lion attacks prey, they don't, unless it's a jackal. They don't like jackals, lions. Buzz, wrong. It's hyenas. Lions don't like hyenas. I don't know how they feel about jackals, though. Gummies. So Reed is pivoting to the point that, if as the Watcher says, if Galactus is beyond good and evil, then anything he does is not evil or good by definition, since he's beyond those concepts, and thus he should not be held to these concepts. So it's similar to like a hurricane isn't evil, a tornado isn't evil, a tsunami is not evil. It's an event. It's happening. These things, they aren't doing anything to someone, but it's just happening to them. So that's kind of what Reed is arguing here, that Galactus is a force of nature, similar to like a tsunami or a hurricane, which is total bullshit because we know Galactus is a sentient being. And Reed is saying, how can any rational man judge that to be neutral? Quite easily. Galactus is a sentient being. The fact that he existed before this universe doesn't mean jack shit. He's in this universe. And he's a sentient being, and he knows what he's doing. And yeah, I know he's looking at it from the hunter's point of view, but nevertheless, hey, it was the farmers, not the hunters, who helped create civilization. So, yeah, you got to follow those rules. Turn the page. So anyway, Reed's going through his kind of Jean-Luc Picard defense here, his standards, his principles. And he's name-dropping Albert Einstein, saying that God does not play dice with the universe, saying that everything exists in this universe for, a reason. It's why it's a reason. And he's trying to claim that basically Galactus, since Galactus was basically birthed at the creation of our universe, he should be considered, a force of nature, a part of the creation of this universe. I understand what he's trying to say intellectually. I don't agree with it. and he's saying that there's a sentient reason for him being here. So he's kind of using, I think, what was that theory designed? When you say that creationism was something that was designed, I forgot what they call it because I'm not very religious. Intelligent design. That's the concept I was looking for. Andrew's calling him out on this nonsense. Um, he's basically saying, listen, my logic, my the only proof that I have that this is real is logic and faith, which is basically me admitting he doesn't have evidence at all. The Watcher is defending this nonsense argument, and then he says he's going to call a second witness, and his second witness is Odin. I have no idea why Odin has so much juice with this court, because I mean Odin is a powerful guy, but he's like one of a few powerful guys in this universe. Why not bring in the Stranger? Why not bring in what's another, Mephisto, another like super powerful entity? Why not bring in what was another one of those powerful entities that now I'm totally forgetting. Anyway, Odin has a lot of pull. Maybe there's a lot of white supremacists in this alien confederation. So anyway, John Byrne, he's really impressed with Odin. Sue's very impressed with him, talking about how imposing he is. Kind of saying, listen, if I were into older guys, I'd be looking at Odin. And the Thing is impressed here. Oh, although he's not that impressed. So anyway, the Watcher is saying, listen, do you want to hear this guy talk? Leandra is kind of like scared, frightened, and she says, oh, well, yeah, sure, I guess. It's kind of like when the bully asks you for your lunch money. Is he really asking? So anyway, Odin is talking here. He's explaining the origin of Galactus. That basically Galactus was in the previous universe, and this is similar to what was happening in Krypton, but rather than just being on that one sole planet, the entire universe was going to implode, like the Titan submersible. And apparently there was one scientist here who realizes that the end is coming. And he's gonna try to make a run for it. Kind of similar to I guess the Inner Light. Toward the end, when they kind of know where their planet is heading. I'm gonna turn the page, see an ad for Bubble Yum. Yeah, I bought a lot of those. So anyway, they're going. The old universe is collapsing in on itself. It's there's nowhere to run because there's just nowhere to go. But apparently there was a much more powerful entity that had sensed this scientist's presence. Was probably thinking, okay, I know you ran away, kind of a little pussy here, but nevertheless you have the survivor's instinct. You're gonna survive. You're gonna try to survive. But the thing is, the only way we're going to make it is if both of us merge together. So rather than being two separate entities, we're one entity. We're a little bit of you, a little bit of me. The scientist agrees to this. He allows this transformation to happen. As the old universe is imploding, there was just one object that survived. And this was sort of this egg-like energy shell that protected this brand new entity that was being created. It's kind of like a zygote, and the Watchers, who amongst the earliest advanced civilizations, they came across the Zygote, and they were watching it and seeing what was going on. Again, this was retold. This storyline was told in an issue of Thor. And so again, John Byrne, he doesn't have to do anything original here. He's just retelling what someone else said or did. Turn the page, see an ad for the Saga of the Crystal Stars, the Crystal Warriors. I have no I'm not familiar with this type of merchandise. I had definitely aged out of this stuff at this point, but you can buy them at Kmart, apparently. So anyway, going back to the story, we see that from that power cocoon emerges Galactus, the Galactus we know. So, Galactus was there at second one, and by that logic, thus, Galactus is a force of nature, a part of the universe, rather than a sentient being as we know him. And Odin's saying basically, listen, this new universal force. And basically he's saying that Galactus exists to test worlds, to test civilizations. So if your world was consumed by Galactus, you're nothing more than a cautionary tale, and that's it. And then it's the worlds who can fight back against Galactus, are the truly worthy ones. This is total nonsense, because if Galactus had gone to Earth even 10 years earlier, there would have been no one to defend Earth against Galactus. So, I mean, again, this is so arbitrary. This is a very libertarian way of looking at things. By the way, John Byrne, going back to the trial with the Marv Wolfman in the creators' rights, John Byrne ended up actually using some of the hard-won victories from comic creators. So on one hand, he was very dismissive of creators' rights, but when his ass was in a financial sling, he suddenly embraced it. So anyway, going back to the story, Odin here, he feels like, his word is the final word. That's how he's treating it. And he's saying, listen, no crime was committed here. And that's that. This powerful authoritarian entity decided, what's going on. The Fantastic Four, at least the Torch and the Thing, they're initially happy here. They feel that, this was the winning testimony in the trial. Sue herself is a little more she's a little more sedate, but at the same time she also sees this as a victory. However, it's John Byrne who kind of throws some cold water on them, and it's explained that while Odin was persuasive to many survivors of their civilizations, that yes, they existed to be the cautionary tale, some of them weren't buying that. And some of the globes are showing that they still feel that, Reed is kind of guilty. And the trial, it won't end until there's a final verdict, when basically everyone has taken a strong stance on their position. They're not going to change. But then the globes become obsolete as they are destroyed by a power blast. And the power blast is from Nova, Frankie Ray. And she's Nova here. The other Nova, who had a comic book in the 70s, they wanted to forget about that guy. I did not like that comic. So anyway, Johnny's reacting very strongly to Frankie Ray's presence, because prior to becoming Galactus' herald, she was dating Johnny Storm. Frankie Ray was a mutant who had powers similar to the Human Torch. So that's like one of the reasons why they were able to connect. And Sue's warning Johnny that that's not really Frankie Ray. that's kind of a different entity that emerged from Frankie, and that she's also kind of a being of the cosmos. And Sue points out that wherever she goes, Galactus is going to follow. Not that Galactus is a follower, it's just that, she's the scout. Turn the page. And then we see Galactus in his cosmic, awe-inspiring self. And we see the faces of the members of this confederation, this confederation of lost planets. Again, this is a group of civilizations who have come together because they have a similar trauma, and they feel the need to connect. They can talk about the places that they used to go to before Galactus destroyed the entire world, and so forth. And the reactions are kind of mixed here. Most of them are scared shitless, but then others are kind of like, they're remembering the bad times too. Turn the page. And we see bullpen bulletins. And basically this is informing the readers what's going on. Basically most of the editors are in San Diego for the Comic-Con. And they're just basically kind of run down what's going on in the offices. Don't care about that. And then we see the Saturday morning cartoons where you have Spider-Man and his amazing friends. And you also had the Hulk. I remember watching those cartoons. They were among the last cartoons I was watching before I started aging out of them. I'll take a look at some of the Mighty Marvel checklist. The problem is that they don't really explain what's going on in the issues. They just tell you what issues are coming out. And is there any that stands out? They're reprinting Steranko's Shield issues. Those were great issues. No, not really. Oh, Marvel Team Up number 137. That one had Aunt May and Franklin Richards. That may be why they printed that comic during Assistant Editors Month. That comic book is one of the worst. That comic book is basically an ad for Twinkies. And they're reprinting some of the Neil Adams X-Men's. Okay, nothing too exciting. Take a look at another ad. It's a James Bond ad. And it appears to be kind of a poster. They're selling this poster, and it's also kind of a role-playing game too. It's sponsored by Victory Games. This might have been their one big push, to get into the gaming market, like with Dungeons and Dragons and TSR. Yeah. Okay, so going back to the story. There's a huge panic amongst the losers of the galaxy, according to Reed Richards. And but there's one figure there that isn't afraid, and this is the alien who kind of was the protocol bot when the Fantastic Four first arrived in this place. And this entity, he has a grudge against Galactus, pretty understandable, and he feels he has a weapon that can destroy Galactus. And the weapon is supposed to react. The pellet would be fired into Galactus's armor, and then the armor would start to break apart, vibrate, and they would cause a chain reaction that would destroy Galactus himself. Now Galactus doesn't notice this being here. He's completely ignoring him. He might not even be aware of his presence. Now the guy with the grudge, he realizes, okay, he has an advantage here, that he can just basically fire this weapon. But on the other hand, he doesn't know whether it's going to work or not, and he doesn't really want to anger Galactus here. And he decides to kind of break off any idea of an attack, because again, he's not 100% sure that this will work, and he wants to continue living. So this is not a suicide mission for this guy. So he behaves appropriately, and he takes the L. And again, part of it was maybe the bluff from Galactus that, he's not worth noticing. And turn the page. So Galactus is speaking. He's aware of the proceedings. He's aware of what's going on. And again, this is fake. He certainly cares about Reed Richards. Now they're trying to say that Galactus is a force of nature, and things just happen. He doesn't make things happen; they just happen. But at the same time, he's showing concern for this one individual who did something for him, and that alone shows that Galactus is a sentient being. And it goes to the Jean-Luc Picard thing of him, sentient beings, have a right to live. There was an episode of Star Trek where they had an opportunity to destroy the Borg. And, Jean-Luc wouldn't do it because he felt that, they had a right to exist. Now, the thing is, the Borg are an existential danger to the Federation. And, for the Federation, they're kind of like, hey, we like living too. And this race is a threat to us. And, we don't have to tolerate it or, put our existence in danger to maintain this, this high-minded idea, this high-minded philosophy that all beings deserve to live. I don't necessarily think that's true. Insects that bore into people's eyes and destroy them, they can kind of go, as far as I'm concerned. Parasites can definitely go. So this is the argument. This is very Jean-Luc Picard. Gladiator is warning Leandra, listen, I've sworn to protect you, but this guy can kick my ass. So you might want to be careful about what you say. But Leandra, she's quite brave, and she directly addresses Galactus, saying that you coming here, you just made things worse, and you just proved our case. But then Galactus feels that there's one last entity that they can bring as a witness, and it turns out to be, I'm gonna turn the page, eternity. Eternity, the single being that is a sum of our entire realities. So the reality of this universe we're living in is summed up in this one entity who is sentient and who can speak. Galactus addresses this entity as Father. He really should be directing this as Mommy, because this character should be Mommy, because the whole idea of Galactus springing from the zygote, that's something, that happens with women. But nevertheless, they couldn't make this character a woman. And apparently all of reality is concerned about the life and death of Reed Richards. So it kindly showed up to kind of throw in its 2 cents. And eternity is going to let everybody know the cosmic truth. Turn the page. And everyone is invoked with the cosmic truth about what's going on in the universe. And then what happens is that basically the knowledge is too great for any one person to hold it. So once this truth has been exposed, everyone immediately forgets it. But the feeling, the vibe that eternity leaves, that stays. So they don't know. They don't know what the cosmic truth is, but they know it's true. Like Schrodinger's cat, and it exists and doesn't exist at the same time. So anyway, and we get the wrap up from John Byrne from his home, and apparently this happened 3 hours later. So John Byrne, he was exposed to the cosmic truth. 3 hours later, he's on the phone with the assistant editor, explaining what's going on, and he basically laid out the story here. In this call, the assistant editor is wondering whether he's had too many gummies, but nevertheless, hey, we got to print a comic here. We don't want to incur those printing fees. No, we don't want to. We don't want to let down our fans. So we got to get this story out. So the Watcher is with John Byrne, saying, "Listen. This is a great story. I need you to do a great job with the art because this is one of the great landmark moments in our universe's history, and it can only be found in a John Byrne comic." And John Byrne's asking about Galactus. What will happen? He's still going to eat worlds. So on one hand, yeah, Reed is free. This is not a crime, but yeah, it's going to be awful when, what Galactus is going to do. And the Watcher is not looking at it from that point of view. He's basically saying, Galactus, he's just there testing worlds. He's not destroying civilizations and destroying planets. He's just testing them. And there will come a time when Galactus perishes, and the Watcher says, "On that day, let the universe mourn." Okay. That was nonsense. But overall, this is a fun story. This is a great story. A very influential story, if I'm right, that Star Trek writers were reading this. Because you can see where Jean-Luc Picard was sort of fleshed out. And it's telling us that the next issue is The Messiah. And that was during John Byrne's really great run on the Fantastic Four. I didn't really fully appreciate it at the time because I was sort of aging out of comics. But I would kind of like keep my eye on what was going on the newsstand. And take a look at another ad. I'm going to skip this kind of bland video game from Mattel Electronics. That was another company that was big, Atari and Mattel Electronics. And here's another one from Parker Brothers. You can see they were all getting into the video game market at this time. It wasn't as big as it is now because the technology did not exist. This is kind of a Donkey Kong-like game. I remember Popeye. They had made a new iteration of Popeye. I remember not liking it. I loved the original Max Fleischer Popeyes, and there was an iteration of Popeye that came out in the 1960s, the early 1960s. I enjoyed those. Those stories were batshit crazy, but I loved that iteration of Popeye. But the other ones, I never really cared for them. And that's it. And that is my review of Fantastic Four 262. And I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.